Hello, everyone. Welcome to another conversation with a practitioner. And today I have a pleasure of speaking with Anna Kerry, who is a stroke survivor, yoga teacher and wellbeing coach who specializes in supporting other stroke survivors. So welcome, Anna.
Thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you here and taking that time to talk with me. And we had few conversations in the past, and I know a little bit about your story because I had a pleasure of working with you before. But I would love you to just tell us a little bit about your story. How did you end up working with specifically with stroke survivors?
It definitely wasn't something that was planned. It was definitely something that came out of my own experience. So when I was 35, which was 2.5 years ago now, I had a stroke, which massively just threw me. It completely came out of the blue. I was fit and healthy, and as far as I was aware, I didn't have anything to say that I'm at higher risk of having a stroke. And so, it was very traumatic. And that morning, I lost the use of my left side, my speech. And it was, really, really, really scary. And luckily, my husband was home and he called 999, got an ambulance to come. And I was blue lighted to the hospital, and without my husband because it was COVID times, unfortunately. And when I was in hospital, I suppose the first thing that happens is that they do some tests. So I had a CT scan. It didn't show anything on the CT scan. It all looked fine. But I got admitted onto the stroke ward, and the doctors soon came to speak to me to do an examination. And I suppose this isn't new to any other stroke survivors that are young, but the thing that the doctors said to me was that we think you probably had a migraine, which it kind of takes away I felt like, oh my gosh, this is a real big thing that's happened to me. It's really scary what's happened. And I think that when someone tells you that it's just a migraine, it kind of takes away that feeling of, oh, okay, maybe I've just overreacted to kind of what's happened to me here, because I was absolutely terrified. And so I spent the rest of that day kind of thinking, okay, well, a migraine, even if it's just a migraine, then, obviously, yes, it's been a terrifying experience, but that's something that I can kind of get over and deal with. And then I went for an MRI scan later that day. And when that results came back, the doctor came to see me and said that I had actually had a stroke. So that's kind of you get the rug pulled from underneath you, because all of a sudden, I think in the morning, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I've had a stroke. Then it says, oh no, it's probably just a migraine. So you're just like, oh, okay, fine, fair enough. And then you get told you've had a stroke. So it's like a double blow. So you're just like, oh my gosh, right, I've got to deal with this again. And the fact that I was on my own in hospital. And I know that I didn't really take any of the information in that she told me, because I literally just sat there and cried. Didn't really know what else to do because I was so worried. And I suppose my first question was, why has this happened? And then my second question is, well, what if it happens again? And I was lucky that the use of my left side was coming back. My speech was coming back okay. It was a little bit slurred still, but not too bad. And so my left side went, and it just felt really weird. Like when the movement was starting to come back, it was just, I don't know, everything felt like it. The only way I can describe it is like it's moving through water when I was trying to move. So it's really having to think about what my movements were doing. So that was really difficult to deal with, all of this stuff going off. And then another doctor comes to see me and drops on me that, oh, you might have a problem with your heart. I was like, okay. He was like, sometimes these things happen where you are born, well, everyone's born with a hole in their hearts. It's like a little flap between the left and right chamber. And within the first year, it closes. But for about 25% of the population, it doesn't. And usually it doesn't cause any issues. So he was like, it may be that's sometimes what we find with young stroke survivors. And I was like, right, okay. So I've had a stroke. I might have a heart issue. And I'm sat on my own in hospital thinking, oh my God. So it was all really very, very difficult. When I stayed in hospital over the weekend, because it was a Friday that it happened, so I stayed in hospital over the weekend, and because my movement had started to come back, I had my husband at home as well, so they allowed me home on the Monday to kind of just continue doing some physio exercises to regain my strength, because I was very, very weak. And obviously there was some more tests and stuff that were done over the weekend and whatnot, but we moved on from that to, I had my heart scan, and then that did show that I had a hole in my heart, which obviously then needed fixing. So basically a clot had formed somewhere and moved through the hole. So when I mean, I wish I could have won the lottery, because these sort of things don't happen often and are really unlucky. But when the flap opened, there was a clot there that just got through and into my brain. So it's very unlucky that it happened. But we, after lots of pushing with hospitals and doctors, and finally got my heart fixed last year. So that's all fixed now. So hopefully there'd be no reason, there shouldn't be any reason why I should have another stroke from that. But obviously I do still need to keep myself healthy and fit, and so that I don't fall into any of the other risk factors of having a stroke. So yeah, that's kind of why I started the work that I now do, because it's been really difficult for me. And I know things that have helped me through my yoga practice. So my yoga practice really helped me in those especially in those early days when I came out of hospital, to really find that connection back to my body. And so that's why I feel like this work's really important.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it sounds, and just listening to you, it's like, the phrase that comes to my mind is that, like, the series of unfortunate events, one leading to the other, quite unusual. It just, the connections, like it being the COVID and the lockdown, not being able to have your husband with you, then what happened with your heart, and the hole in your heart, and the blood clot, and all of that kind of stuff, and then having to deal with it on your own when you are in the hospital, and being told, no, you didn't have it, then you did have it, and then, by the way, you also have got the hole in your heart. And there's so much in here. If I think about this, it's like so much uncertainty, and that response brings to mind this response of complete terror, and being in this very, very vulnerable space completely on your own. That's very, very hard. Very hard.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I often say, whenever I talk about this, it's funny, because when I was at the hospital and being told that you've had a stroke, and I always say, it's all well and good. Like, the doctor was lovely, was really, really nice. She was a lovely lady. But you need more than a pat on the arm from a nice doctor when you've been told something like that. You just want a hug from someone you love.
Yeah.
And and I didn't take in any of the information that she told me, because one, I was exhausted as well. I was so I was so tired at that point, as well as being emotionally all over the place, that I spent the whole weekend thinking that I'd not actually had a full stroke. I spent the whole weekend thinking that I'd actually had a TIA, which is a transient ischemic attack, and that's what they call like a mini stroke. So that's where there's a blood clot in the brain, but it kind of passes itself through on its own. So there's not too much damage that's done. So yeah, I spent the whole weekend thinking that that's what had happened, when actually that's not what had happened. And there was actually a part of my brain that had actually died away because of this blood clot that was there. And it wasn't until I saw my scan pictures on the Monday, when I was trying to get my head around everything, and the doctor was like, would it help to see the scans? And I was like, yes, I think it would. So then I can kind of just get my head around it a little bit. And it wasn't until I saw that white part on the scan and thought, oh, something really serious has happened here. And I think that I think that sometimes moving on from the hospital and recovery and further down the line in recovery, when you've made a good physical recovery, I think that there's this element of, oh, well, she's okay. She's fine. She looks okay. She's made a good recovery, and that's it. And it's ended.
Because that's one of the things that we talked about before previously, yes, wasn't it? It's this kind of that when I look at you or somebody else looks at you, you look, you know, you don't have any visible disability.
Nice.
That kind of, I would when I look at you, I would say, okay, there is something there within the movement or within your presentation. But there isn't anything there.
Yeah.
So obvious, and yet something really, really difficult and really serious happened to your body and your brain, that then has got like long-term impact on you know, on your ability or your identity, on, I guess, how you approach your health, how you approach everything.
Yeah, I think it's I've said this before, and I think that for me personally, I don't think you can go back to how you were pre-stroke. And I know that if there's other stroke survivors that are listening to this, that may sound really disheartening. But I think that there is something that when you go through something like that, and something as traumatic as that, even if you are fully capable of moving all of the body and everything like that, I think that there's still the inside that is still going to be something that's changed. And that's not to say that that's going to be a bad thing either. I'm so much more kinder to myself now than what I was before my stroke. And weirdly, I'll be really grateful for my stroke for that. You know, I think there's things that I prioritize more now, like my health and my well-being are my number one priority. You know, it's taken me a while to get there still. You know, I'm 2.5 years down the line, and that didn't come straight away just like that. And it's not going to come straight away, because there's so many other things that you need to do for healing to be able to get to that point.
Yeah.
But for me, I think that you have been through something that is really traumatic, and you need to honor that and honor yourself and your body and what it's been through. And I think that even if there is change after stroke, which I think there always is change after stroke, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. I think sometimes people think that change, like some people are scared of change, and, you know, it's usually fear of the unknown, isn't it? You know, so I think that what we need to be thinking about when we're recovering from stroke is not comparing ourselves to where we were before our stroke, because I think this is such a massive thing in stroke recovery, is that there's lots of, I just want my life to be like it was before. And I think, do you know what, let's take off the rose tinted glasses to before, because life wasn't all rainbows and butterflies and unicorns, you know. Like I think, like, sometimes I've thought to myself, I don't want this stress, I don't want this anxiety, I don't want this worry, I don't want this uncertainty in my life and in my family's life. And I feel like, you know, you can, as a stroke survivor, you feel like you've brought that on to people within your family, which is a whole other thing. But, you know, I think we need to think that it's not, my life wasn't amazing, like it wasn't perfect before the stroke. And I think we tend to forget that. Yeah. And I think we just look at all of the positive things that life was before stroke, and we kind of forget about all of the other things that maybe weren't great. Yeah. And I think that, you know, if you've got risk factors that have, you know, brought on the stroke, then maybe that's an opportunity for you to look at pre-stroke. You know, how can you change those things? What do you want your life to look like after you've had a stroke? Because this is your opportunity to change how your life is or was for the better. I think it's an opportunity, personally.
I love what you just said, and that makes me think about, there is the language plays such a big part in here, isn't it? It's like you've used that word, stroke recovery, like I have to recover from it, like recover completely or as much as I can. And the emphasis is on getting back and recovering. And it's the same with trauma, isn't it? People, when people talk about trauma, any other trauma, because this sounded like a very, very traumatic event for you. It's this kind of focus on trauma releasing or trauma recovery or trauma. And what you just said is so key, so key about, it changes you as a person, fundamentally changes you as a person. And it's not no amount of releasing or recovering is going to change that.
Yeah.
And then there is the process of really embracing who you are, allowing yourself to start making choices, even if it feels like you don't have a choice in certain areas. There are other areas that you can have a choice. And maybe that is an invitation to living your life in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
Just like it did for you, with more focus on self-care, that reassessing of priorities. And really what we're talking here is, what some people call post-traumatic growth. And as you said, you are 2.5 years into that process, and it hasn't happened straight away, and it's still happening. It's that change is ongoing. And so I wonder, you mentioned that already, that your yoga practice was really, really kind of fundamental in helping you.
Yeah.
And I remember something about the breath when we talked in the past, something that your husband told you about the breath. Maybe you can kind of tell us about that.
Luckily, my husband was there with me when I was having my stroke, because he had it all together and I obviously did not. Which, one of the things my husband said to me when I was going through the stroke was, use your yoga breathing. And honestly, it just changed the situation it changed how I could deal with the situation. So I'm going to take away the fact that I'm having a stroke, but by focusing on my breath, just bringing some deeper inhalations in and some longer exhalations, just to allow my body to try to, relax a little bit, and to feel that actually it's okay, we're dealing with this and we're okay. It just changed everything for me, going from that real heightened panic, just not that I'm going to go right down here and not panic and not be worried about what's happening, but just shifting it a little bit, just that scale, just shifting slightly. And it was just such a gift in that moment that he gave me, that I was just like, oh God, yes, I can do this. And it just made me feel that I could control something in this situation. And I think that's kind of what it's about, because when you go through something like that, you can't, you look at your arm and it doesn't move, and you're willing it to move. And it feels like everything's just stripped away and taken away from you, and you've got no control. So it's about that, just gave me that little bit of control back, to be like, actually, no, it's okay. We're dealing with this. It's okay. I can do this. I can get through this. And so, that for me was such a massive thing that he did for me, just to give me that reminder, because obviously I wasn't thinking straight at the time.
I love that. I think it's such a simple understanding of how much breath can, what role breath can play. And I love it that it was your husband reminding you. I'm guessing he does yoga. He doesn't do yoga.
I've tried, but
he understands the power of breath.
But he understands that it does help me, I think, and he understands how much it means to me as well as a practice. So I think, and I think he does understand, because My husband in the past, he has suffered with anxiety and panic attacks, so he is quite well versed in that side of things. So that's why I think he was just like, okay, use your yoga breathing. We've got this. You're going to be okay. Even though I think he was just like a duck under the surface. He was just like paddling, like, oh my god, because he was very panicked. But he didn't show it.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I love that.
I think the thing is as well, like, after I came home from hospital, I started using my yoga practice more in my recovery, was really what helped me through as well, because it's when I was in hospital, one of the doctors actually did yoga, and she was like, oh, I says, my anxiety is really through the roof, really, really high. Do some meditation. And I actually, at that point, I'd only done my 200-hour training. I didn't know anything about, I'd not done any training in trauma or anything else, anything like that. So I was like, oh yeah, meditation. Yeah, I'll do that. And I couldn't, because obviously, so much going on that it was really, really difficult. And it wasn't until I got home and I spoke to some people about if they knew anyone that did like trauma yoga. And I specifically said, not that I want to teach it, that I want to go to someone and I need someone to help me. And luckily the anatomy teacher that did my 200-hour course, he'd done some training in trauma as well. So I was on the phone to him and he was just like, obviously within the realms of whatever your doctors told you to do, but he was like, if you can move your body and use your yoga practices and move in meditation rather than just sitting in stillness, that might be better for you. And I was like, okay. And I was terrified of doing downward facing dog, because I was like, well, like in my mind at the time as well, I was like, well, all the blood's going to rush to my head. And my anatomy teacher was like, the blood isn't rushing to your head, Anna. Like, remember what I've taught you? And I was like, okay. So I was terrified of doing stuff like that. But actually, once I kind of got more into it and got more into the movement and doing things, it just helped me feel so much better, and it helped me connect back to my body, because you can definitely feel like there's a dissociation from the body after you've been through something like this. And I think it's definitely something that makes you feel like, oh, my body's turned against me. So you need to draw that connection back again. And that's what I always start with whenever I do any work, is awareness, and drawing that awareness back to the body so that you can start to connect again and start to feel. Because there's no, feelings, emotions, and all of those sort of things, there's no getting away from them. We have to feel them to be able to get to the other side. So yeah, my yoga practice really helped me. And then obviously the training that I took on with you, which was amazing. Like when I first did, I think it was like the 4-hour CPD thing, where it was like and a little bit on trauma. And the way you explained it, I was just like, oh my God, light bulb moment. It really just made it so clear to me. And so that's obviously why I went on to do your other training. And I think that what I've said about that training is that it's not just to help other people. It helped me so much with my own trauma, and to process and to go through what I needed to go through to get me in a position where I can be like, okay, well, I'm still going through it 2.5 years down the line, but I've got loads of tools and practices that I can put in place to help me. And then I can now also help other people, which is something that from the very beginning of having the stroke, I was thinking about my yoga practice and thinking, wow, I'm not so accessible as what I thought I was with my teaching. Because the stuff that I was teaching, even though I was using blocks and bolsters and things like that, it's still, if you can't use one side of your body, I was like, none of this stuff I've been teaching is accessible at all. So that made me think. And from the beginning, it was very much like, yes, I want to use this as for something I want to get some good out of what's happened to me. And so that's why I went into doing the work that I now do with stroke survivors. And since doing that trauma training, I've then done accessible yoga training and then done wellbeing coach training as well, so that it's more of a whole, and like I'm looking at someone from a holistic point of view, and that's really important to me. And the work that I do is that we're looking at the whole of someone. It's not just this one part that, oh, they can't move their left arm or something. It's not just that they've got something that they can't move their leg. It's the wholeness of them that I'm really looking at now. And I think that there is with stroke recovery a lot of emphasis on physical recovery, rightly so, because I think physical recovery is obviously the thing that people see from the outside. So people will see and people know, and it makes life difficult when you've got a physical disability. So rightly so that there is lots of emphasis on the physical recovery, less so on the psychological recovery, which is something that I found really lacking, and which is a lot of my work is focused on psychological recovery as well, because that's something that I don't think you can make a full recovery without looking at that psychological side of it, because it's a lot to deal with having a stroke, and especially at a young age, it's a lot to deal with. I've had, for me personally, I've had counselling, I've had therapy. I have all of these tools from just doing, like, learning about trauma. And it's still a lot some days, because that's life and recovery isn't linear. But the work I do, I just feel is so important to look at that wholeness of someone so that we can then move forward and so that nothing's getting left behind, and nothing's getting neglected is what I think is really important.
Yeah, I love what you just said. And I love your journey. It's like the stroke happened. You had to start recovering. Then you started looking what you need, which is how to make your own yoga practice more accessible, and then training in trauma-informed yoga, and then following up and doing some more accessible yoga, and then doing your well-being coach training. I think it's so amazing. It's I think this kind of work that you do, or that we do as practitioners, the more we come from the systems thinking perspective, the more we understand to bring the whole person approach, but also understand that you cannot separate the person from the environment. The more holistic in that sense, inner and outer, that we approach our work, the more transformational it is, and the more real it is. It's like, what you are talking about, if we just focus on recovery in this context, in a recovery from stroke, on the physical stuff, but not acknowledge the impact of the event, the impact on somebody's identity, their well-being, their relationships, their work, the worldview, their mental health, then we are missing out, really huge part. And it's, yes, they might maybe recover the functionality within their body, but, that traumatic event, depending on how somebody has experienced it, because we know that, trauma is how we respond within, not the event itself. For some people, it might be extremely traumatic. And that part about looking after the wholeness of you. So we are back to this mind-body connection, the real mind-body connection that, unfortunately, our medical model is not embracing fully, to say the least. And so, practitioners like you can bring that holistic approach. And what I love the most is, that you have got that understanding. You've gone through it yourself. You already had some tools. You then learned to use those tools in a different way within the context of really being trauma informed and trauma aware, and then bringing it within your community. I think that is really amazing. And I really admire that about you, that you followed what's important to you. You followed your own path. You prioritized your own healing and grow first, so then you can do the work and support others through that, stability and understanding. I love that.
I think it's important for stroke survivors to know my story before they work with me. And I think that a lot of them come to me because I do know what they're going through. Obviously, every stroke is different. But I always believe that we've got just threads that tie us together as stroke survivors. There's a common theme between stories, where we can find some common ground. And I think it's really important that stroke survivors know that the tools and things that I use, and that, I may say yoga, and when I say yoga, it brings up a lot of different things for people.
Bendy Young.
Yeah.
I
always say to people, whenever I try and break the ice with people, and I'm not going to get you standing on your head, putting your foot on your head. I don't understand why you'd want to do that. So, I think there's a lot of things that come up with the word yoga. And I think it's important that the stroke survivors see the work that I do, because it's not just the physical postures. And it's important for them to understand that yoga is accessible.
Or can be accessible.
I was going to say, if done correctly, it can be accessible. So it can be all of those other things that you see on Instagram and all of that. And that's absolutely fine. I've got no issues with any of that stuff. Like, if that's what you want to do, you go for it. I'm just not that flexible. But I think the stuff that I do is accessible for people. It could be that, I'm doing a session with someone and we don't even do any movement. It could be that I have another session with someone else and we do a lot of movement. Each person is different, and it's about meeting that person where they're at, and using where they are to then kind of move forwards to where they want to be. But it's about just working together with them to kind of get to where they want to be in the future.
Yeah, I love that, because yes, there is so much. Yoga has become so popular, so popular. I mean, coaching is very popular as well.
Yes.
They're both kind of aspects of well-being and that kind of, big business booming. But really, ultimately, it comes down to us as practitioners and how we work with our clients, how we support them, and how accessible we make it through our approach, through meeting them where they are at, through the language that we use, through that trauma-informed principles of collaboration and choice, building on trust and safety that then leads to empowerment. So really, I guess I have a question for you. If somebody who is listening, who is maybe a yoga teacher, who or wellness practitioner, who wants to kind of follow in your footsteps, and do this kind of more, I would say, specialized work, what would your advice, one piece of advice be to them? What would you say to them?
Get to know the community that they're going to be working in, I think. I obviously am I suppose for me it's different because I am very much ingrained into the community that I'm working in because of my experience myself. And I think that, like I've said, people do tend to come to me because I've had a stroke, so that I can kind of, because I understand, and I know, there is other yoga teachers and wellbeing practitioners out there that also work with people that's had a stroke, that again, they've had a stroke. So there is a few of us out there. But I think it's really important to get to know the community that you want to be working for and working in, because at the end of the day, it's all about them. It's all about them, and it's all, I think that with stroke recovery and stroke survivors, especially young survivors, there is this thing about, obviously, like I said before, you know, well, we think you've had a migraine, or you're very much brushed off. And I think by listening to what they're saying and giving them that safe space to actually just come to you and be like, actually, this is what I feel and this is what I think I need, or, you know, maybe I don't even know what I need. You're listening to them and you're giving them agency back, and you're allowing them that time and that space. So for me, I think really integrating into the community that you really want to be working with. You know, I don't think you necessarily need to have been through. I wouldn't advise anyone going out and having a stroke.
Yes. Of course.
You know, I don't think you necessarily need to, but there are so many other different things nowadays that, you know, there's lots of things on, like, I was just talking to my mum the other day about menopause, perimenopause and all of those types of things. So there's lots of different things that you could really say your niche is, if you want to use that word. I know it's quite popular in yoga circles, niching. So if you want to say that, then, you know, there's loads of things out there, but I just say really get to know the community, get to know what it is they need, rather than assuming you know what they need. Because I mean, I've been through stroke and I still don't want to assume I know what people need. Yeah. I still want to speak to them and see what it is that they need. How can I help them? How can I be of service? And I think that's really important.
I love that, what you just said. How can I be of service?
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, you know, that's
what I'm here for.
Yeah, exactly. That's what our work is about, really. It's about our clients, our students, and how we are, you know, working with them. And one of the things that really comes to my mind is, you know, how sometimes we can use that jargon, this really professional jargon. I'm going to do this with my fingers in captions, words in captions.
Yes.
Yeah, using this jargon about even around the nervous system regulation.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I've been there. I've used that jargon.
Me too.
Hold my hands up. Well, it's about, yeah, you really need to, like, I've really thought about it a lot over this past year, and it's really about speaking in a language that people understand, in a normal language, not in an academic language of the books that we are talking about. You know, that's all good and well when we're doing trainings and we're learning and we're exploring the models and theories, and that's okay. But if we start to use that with clients, for me, I think stroke survivors just want to either, like, know that they want something that's going to help with their anxiety. They just want to feel like they're not always on edge. You know, they want to feel like they're not always thinking about having another stroke. And I think it's just trying to, like, using that language that they use to kind of really help people to understand. Lovely. I love that. I love that. So, Anna, if you know, whoever is listening would like to know a little bit more about your work, whether it's a you know, somebody who has been through stroke or another practitioner, how can they find you? So you can find a whole host of information on my website, which is www.thestrokewellbeingcoach.com. And on there is all of the ways that you can work with me. I also have a lot of free resources on there as well for people. I have a wellbeing booklet for stroke recovery, which has got some really great tips in there for the things that have helped me through my recovery. You know, I know that they've worked for me. I've seen them work for other people as well. So that's really good for you if you're struggling. So yeah, there's lots of great free resources on there as well. So and all the information on there about how you can work with me. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Anna. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you for having me. Thank you.